Okay, before we start, we have a game called Randoms that we play. Are you ready for the game?
I'm ready.
Okay, so basically, it's randoms. You just say anything random because I'll be asking you random questions. So anything, no answer is wrong or right. So you just say anything. So I'm just gonna start the timer. So it's 30 seconds. Okay, let me start. Yeah. Okay. African country with the best food.
Senegal.
Where to watch the sunset?
Hawaii.
Sunny side or scrambled eggs?
Neither.
Where are we turning up?
In my backyard.
Timer. Okay, okie dokie. Yeah, let's get on it. So I'm gonna be asking you like questions about your journey in your craft and your creative space. So the first question would be, can you please tell us who is Charaé? When was she born? Where was she born? Like your childhood, basically.
Yep. So my name is Chara Robinson. I am 37 years old, which for people who don't like math, that means I was born in 1983. I was born in Long Island, New York, but my family is decidedly from the South. So on my mom's side, from Georgia and Florida, and on my dad's side, from North Carolina. Growing up, I spent every summer going down south to see my family. At the same time, very much a New Yorker, born and bred. As a kid, my mom really, really wanted me to be like a model or an actress. So I spent a crazy amount of time doing auditions in New York City. But when that didn't work out, I mostly just performed in my grandmother's hair salon singing Whitney Houston, How Will I Know? I was always a bit of a nerd, but also a performer. I loved science and history, still do to this day. And yeah, that's who I was like as a kid. Very, very dramatic, did a lot of theater growing up, dance, cheerleading, very much always sort of in performer mode as a child, but also was very much like into sort of the idea of achievement. That was a big part of my story as a kid. I wanted to be the best at everything that I did.
Wow. Can you please tell us like what do you do now currently?
Yep, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Tastemakers Africa. It very much started out as a dream. I wanted to go to the continent for as long as I can remember. That was my dream. And I realized that travel within and to the continent was difficult, misunderstood by both people living on the continent, and particularly those of us out in the African diaspora. So I started a travel company that centered African creatives and entrepreneurs in the story of tourism, and really just shared the story of why people should travel to Africa through their lens, and created a brand that made it cool and sexy and exciting, and really found ways to help this company be supportive of not only travelers, but people on the continent who wanted to make money by showing people their cities.
Ooh, interesting. Because that just also answered like my other question, which was asking what has been your motivation to start Tastemakers. So now starting Tastemakers, when did you start it?
Technically in 2015.
Ooh, okay, so from 2015 to now, and the impact that it has made globally, like how do you feel about the impact that it has made globally?
It's so funny. I always feel like we haven't done enough. Like I constantly am interrogating, I started this business almost 6 years ago now. And, where I thought we'd be in 6 years is much bigger than what we are now. And the impact I wanted to have is much bigger. But I also acknowledge that we've done a lot. I mean, 6 years ago, people were still, Black people, to name it, were still very reticent to travel to the continent. And in some ways still had the same ideas about why travel to Africa as white people did. Like Black people in the diaspora were still thinking about safaris and poverty. Like, we also had those same narratives. And even within the continent, like in South Africa, I remember when I first went to South Africa, South Africans would say things like, I'm going to Africa, if they were leaving South Africa. Like that was the energy. So in some small way, I feel like Tastemakers has played a major part in sort of changing that narrative on how Africa sits in people's consciousness, as a region to travel to, but also like helping people get from travel to Africa to travel to Senegal. I want to travel to South Africa. I want to travel to Botswana. I want to travel to Kenya, and really helping, and then it's like, I want to go see where Trevor Sturman came from. I want to go see where Mutua came from in Kenya. And so really framing why we should connect with the continent through the lens of, quite frankly, young people. I feel like Tastemakers did that and is continuing to find ways to do that. And I feel like that is revolutionary.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Because I attended the Africa Day event last May, and it was really amazing. Like I got to connect with amazing people that I'm still friends with even today.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, I was there. Like it was nice. It was really nice. So it is making an impact. So I'm really glad that you started it. Because imagine if you didn't start it, I wouldn't have connected with the people I connected with. So what has been your biggest challenge, like with Tastemakers and starting it? Can you please take us through the biggest challenge you have faced so far?
I think probably two challenges. On the one hand, I'm African-American, born and raised here. Family has been in America for generations since slavery, and negotiating space on how I show up on the continent has been an ongoing journey. In many ways, I'm telling an African story as a person of African descent, but not as a person who can name a grandfather or mother, like, you know what I mean? I'm not even an immigrant in that way. But also wrestling with how Western ideology has planted itself in my own mind. I think back to who I was or how I engaged with people when I first started my company, and it was a mess. In retrospect, I'm like, how much of that American was in you? Because when you're a minority in your own country, you're rarely thinking about privilege. Black people are under attack in America. So I never was interrogating my privilege as an American, because my own pathology has been one of trauma in America. And so being able to pull yourself out of that, going into an African space on the continent and needing to sort of distill, the different ways you think about the world or how you do business or how you build relationships, either realizing that the Western way of doing business is transactional. You show up in a place, you give an idea, you make an exchange and you leave. I mean, a lot of it was, when I was starting, I moved to Ghana for a while. I moved to South Africa for a while, spent a lot of time in Senegal. And really in each of those situations, I had to learn the differences between sort of what was sort of ingrained in me as an American, in a way that I hadn't really interrogated before, whether that was how you do business, how you speak to people, how things get done, how you show up and show people your value. I had to learn that, depending on people's economic situation, like delaying people payment for a few days, where in the American context, like this is like normal or like, oh, it's to be expected. If people are counting on you for their livelihood, like that's your word. And like, you need to, and so I think just relearning, unlearning, how to build meaningful relationships when you're representing folks was a big one. And it's been something that I feel like has made me just a much more dynamic and stronger person, you know, where I sit now, but they were really hard lessons in the first couple years of the business. And I think the other lesson is just sort of when you're doing something that's largely driven by passion and like a deep-seated personal belief system, right? So I didn't start doing something that wasn't connected to me. You know, I started doing something based on a belief system I had, like at a soul level. And so doing that, but then needing to sort of understand that, like, when this thing grows, you know, I didn't know anything about finance and I didn't know any of that shit, like, at all. And just till now, like, just learning, you know, what it takes to make a business sustainable, how you have to think about the things you want to do versus like the financial implications, and how to weigh impact. Even, you know, every idea you have isn't the one you should go after, you know. So really just understanding impact and finance and structures and, you know, all of that stuff, especially if you're trying to build something like at a global scale. um, Learning those things, but also remembering the people you're building for at all times. Like, it can be really easy when you become like a bigger thing to sort of index for that. And I think COVID for me has been incredibly humbling in its reminder that, like, that stuff is like the outcome, but the thing you really have to focus on is the people, like, in the community you're building for and the community you're building alongside. That should never change. Like, just no matter how many accolades come, like, just never forgetting that.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. It's a gem. It really is. When you were starting out, how was your support system? Like, did you get any support with your craft?
I was really fortunate. I mean, my friends were very supportive of me. I remember my friend Kwame, who I just talked to the other day, he passed along the entry for She Leads Africa, which at the time was not the like big multimedia company it is. It was a startup pitch competition in Nigeria that no one had ever heard of, you know? And so, you know, Kwame passed that along. I ended up going to Nigeria and winning this competition. And I think I won like $10,000, which was huge, like with an idea, you know, that I had. But like Afua and Yasmin and that network and my friends back in New York, people were really, really supportive of me. And I remember, you know, I would be coldly reaching out to creatives on the continent, like Laduma and Mutua and Yagazie. And I'd just be like in their DMs, like, hey, I'm doing this thing. Can I share your photo? Or can I do, you know, and all of those people, all of those people were the people who in many ways gave Tastemakers credibility, you know, without Africans being like, yes, you know, I wouldn't have been able to do half of what we were able to achieve as a brand, as a company, because it would have seemed inauthentic.
Wow, like I love that. Like I love seeing the experiences that Tastemakers has been through. What is your biggest wish for creatives in the diaspora of African descent and of who are also like in the African continent and also the African continent? What is your biggest wish for the creative space?
I really want us to seek validation from each other first. Like, I really want us to support one another. I really want us to be full in what that looks like. I want us to really believe in one another's dreams. And I want, you know, being featured on your platform to be as important as Vogue, if not more. Like, I really want us to understand our agency as a global Black people who have survived so much and still been able to be in a power to be some of the most dynamic creatives on the planet. And I want us to really lean into that.
Yeah, that's some word right there. Hey, it really is. What has been the biggest gap that you think needs to be filled, like in the creative space, and how can we fill it?
What do I think is the biggest gap? I think honestly, like a true dedication to craft. I think in this digital time, it's so easy to want to be a creative. You know what I mean? Like it's like the age of the creative is where we are now. Everybody's creative. Everybody wants to be creative. Everybody can pick up their phone and be a photographer. And on one hand, that sort of democracy is good. It's good that we're inspiring one another and making, this way of being tangible, by being examples. But I think what you see time and time again is that people who truly invest in their craft, by extension, are people who invest in themselves. And I think that sort of internal growth, healing, attention then translates into the type of creative you are and the way you nurture your craft. And I think people who do that don't really need a lot of noise along the way and eventually break through one way or another. That's just my sense of it. Yes, we need funding. Yes, we need connections. Yes, we need, yes, those are the sort of proverbial things, but I always try to speak from the things we can control. And the things we can control are, who are we as people who are in the world as creatives?
Oh, yeah, that's so true. And what is your take on the changing the narrative term and owning our own stories as creatives of the African continent, also of African descent? What's your take on that?
It's interesting. I think that changing the narrative is a good idea. And in many ways, I think creatives are a driving force for why the narrative has changed, particularly in the last decade. That being said, we haven't defined what we want to change to. What is the vision beyond changing the narrative? Where do we want to be as Black people of African descent? And I think this is true of creatives, of social justice. Yes, we want change, but in what image?
So to anyone who's watching this right now and they feel stuck, what would you motivate them by? What would you say to them?
Ooh, that's funny. I felt very stuck towards the end of 2020 and took a 2-month break from really doing anything, which I'd never done. So I think one is take space, and whatever that looks like this grind till you fall. No, that's not the energy. That's if COVID has taught us anything, that is not the energy. So I think, rest, honestly rest, and whatever rest looks like to you. I just did my first watercolor last week, and now I'm turning into the watercolor Instagram tutorial rabbit hole. Now that's my rest. Or I love the Great British Bake Off. That's my favorite thing to binge on Netflix. I just think really understanding that you get to be a whole dynamic person. And so when you're stuck, sometimes it's okay to just be stuck and until you're ready to be unstuck. And I think we live in a world that's do. And I'm just nah, don't, pause. And then, the other piece of it is you don't have to get unstuck by yourself. So many of us have people in our families and our networks that truly want to support us, but we barely ask, or we think that we have to be super specific in our ask. And there are amazing opportunities that sit right within the network that you hold, ideas, thought processes that are there to support you. But you have to start the conversation and be vulnerable enough to say, I'm stuck. I don't know. I'm ill-equipped. I'm not good at, and unfortunately for Black people, wherever you sit, those things are often, Black excellence. We got to be Black and excellent, all the fucking time. Like, no, can I be Black and trying to figure it out? Like, and I think those things are the things we need to lean into when we're stuck, is like our pure humanity and the process that sometimes you're just stuck and it's all right.
That's so true. Thank you for that.
No
and
problem.
last question. Are you ready, Sherry, for the last question?
I'm ready.
Okay, so it's International Women's Month. And if Sherry had the opportunity to sit down at a table, at a picnic, anywhere with your 18-year-old self or your younger self, what would you say to her?
Ooh, what would I say to her? I would tell her that she is enough. And I would tell her to guard her dreams like her life depended on it.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So guys, follow. I'm new to this. Follow Tastemakers Africa. Yeah. And Sherry, of course. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.